There are many ways to go about building your wealth. You could start your own business and grow it until you sit atop a massive fortune, such as Bill Gates did with Microsoft. You could educate yourself on the markets and begin trading until you've multiplied your capital many times over, like Warren Buffett has. Or you could simply optimize your spending, thus enabling you to put your leftover funds to work for you and over time grow a fortune like countless people have done for generations. However, ideally, you'd incorporate all three of these avenues into your wealth building journey in some form or fashion. That brings us to Scott Trench, author of the book Set for Life, whose model explaining the 3 stages of wealth creation have helped countless people develop a game plan for taking advantage of each of these pathways to building wealth over the years. Today, we're going to be going over what those 3 stages are and the sometimes unspoken, but no less important, traits and habits that I feel allow you to make the most of each stage on your journey to financial freedom. But before we get going, be sure to like this video if you haven't already, as it really does help out the channel a lot, and subscribe with notifications on for more money-related videos like this one every single week. And if you want to further support this channel, you can check out some of the links I've left in the description below, which includes a 30-day free trial of Audible and 2 free audiobooks of your choice, as well as a list of some books on money I'd recommend checking out with your free trial. So the 3 stages of wealth creation, as laid out by Scott Trench, essentially boil down to saving, income, and investing. He doesn't often lay them out that way, but that's the basic idea. And they're often implemented in that order. Let me explain. The first stage of wealth creation is saving, specifically saving through the use of frugality. Assuming you have a halfway decent income, Trench recommends looking for a job that enables you to earn at least a median wage, and if you can't get that, then he recommends getting more training or education, or otherwise improving your employability until you do. So I guess you could technically call that stage 1A, and then becoming more financially efficient would be stage 1B. Then according to Trench, and basic common sense, finding ways to sustainably lower your burn rate, such as through house or transportation hacking, is a key to setting up a good financial foundation for yourself. Trench says that the 2 best categories of your budget to try and optimize are your housing and transportation costs. I would argue that debts, if you have any, would be a solid 3rd category as well. The reason for these categories being the ideal starting point is twofold. First, in most people's budgets, your mortgage or rent and your transportation expenses like gas, maintenance, insurance, and even depreciation are typically the 2 largest categories in your budget, sometimes taking up half or even more of your overall budget when all is said and done. Therefore, if you could find a way to sustainably lower these costs, you'd be able to start saving up a stack of cash very quickly. And second, because for most of us, paying off debts or having roommates, or getting a multi-family unit and living in one of the units while renting out the others, is going to be more sustainable long-term than trying to increase your savings rates to the heights that Trench recommends, which is roughly 50% of your take-home pay or more, than trying to cut your spending in categories like food, entertainment, or recreation. Not only because those categories typically make up a smaller chunk of most people's budgets, meaning that you'd essentially have to cut it out of your budget entirely to reach those targeted savings rates, but also because if you're cutting out everything from going to the movies to traveling and even dining out with friends, you're unlikely to stick with that for very long, because you're going to feel like you're missing out on too much of life. I don't know many people who have managed to pay off their debts, especially the high interest ones like credit cards, that feel the same way, at least in the long run. It might kind of suck while you're paying them off. As for how you go about minimizing these costs, Trench recommends looking into house hacking. The most common form of this is to simply get some roommates and split the costs of a place, just like many of us did when we were going to school. Now, some of you may balk at that idea, which is quite understandable, as I don't know many people that would want to live like a college student for the rest of their lives. And that's not necessarily a deal breaker, as this doesn't have to be a forever thing, and there are other ways you can lower your effective housing costs. However, if you are on the fence about it, let me lay out Trench's arguments so that you can decide for yourself if the potential rewards would be worth the inconvenience, even if only for the first few years as you get your financial feet underneath you. So, first things first. House hacking will lower your effective shelter costs, obviously, since you're either splitting costs between roommates or letting your renters cover some or maybe even all of your housing costs. Let's say that there are 1-bedroom rentals available in your area for $1,200 a month, and 2- and 3-bedroom options available for $1,500 and $1,800 a month respectively. If you were to get the 1-bedroom place, your effective housing costs would be about $1,200 a month. However, if you were to get a roommate and move into a 2-bedroom place, your effective cost would only be about $700 $750 a month. If you got a couple of roommates and moved into a 3-bedroom place, your effective costs would drop even further to $600 a month. Actually, the difference would be probably even larger than that, since you'd also be splitting costs for things like utilities and possibly other things like subscription services. But I'm just trying to keep things simple here. At $600 a month, the amount you'd be saving by getting a couple of roommates instead of going it alone, you're putting away $7,200 a year, which is not half bad if I do say so myself. And that's assuming that you don't previously have any room left over in your budget before house hacking, which hopefully wouldn't be the case if you were earning a median wage or more. And it also assumes that you weren't implementing any other savings strategies such as paying off debts or transportation hacking. Speaking of which, transportation hacking can also take on many forms, such as carpooling with others, using public transit, if it's available in your area, or even biking to and from work and other frequently traveled places. Again, if it's feasible in your situation. Ideally, what would happen is that you'd be able to find a place to live somewhere near your work so you can limit or even outright eliminate most of your transportation costs, which, unless the place is significantly more expensive than your other viable options, would only serve to save you time and stress due to not having to drive as much and increase the amount of money that you could put away each month, thus accelerating the timeline when you could move on to the next stage and or adjust your living situation, if that's what you choose to do. Whichever way you go about doing it, completing this stage will have enabled you to save up a chunk of cash. In Trench's case, he managed to save up approximately $25,000, or about a year's worth of spending in his case, which then allowed him to emotionally enter the next stage of wealth creation, though he admits that the exact amount of savings any given person will require to be emotionally comfortable with moving on to stage 2 is going to differ, so your results may vary. The second stage of wealth creation is finding an income stream, or multiple income streams, with high growth potential. Now, you may be wondering why this wasn't the first thing that Scott recommended people do. I mean, if we could start by earning a lot of money, then wouldn't all that stuff about living with roommates just be unnecessary? Well, maybe, but that really depends on how much money we're talking about here. And there's another reason that Scott generally recommends starting with frugality. Most people who are working a full-time job will not have the energy, time, desire, and or skill set required to start up a business on the side and significantly raise their incomes. Some people will, of course. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that it's not for everyone. For many of us, between work, family time, fun with friends, and hopefully sleep, it's just not very feasible at first. So for most people, it's best to start with saving through frugality, and then shift our focus over to significantly raising our incomes after we've gotten a good financial foundation to build from. But with that being said, there are many avenues to potentially significantly raise your income. There's the obvious one of starting your own business, but you could also look for a commission-based job where you could be highly successful. Or you could even go back to school and get a job in an in-demand field where there's room to grow. In Trench's case, this stage came in the form of working at a startup that he was passionate about for the website biggerpockets.com and getting paid based on commissions. After a couple of years, he managed to sock away about $100,000 worth of liquid wealth, which opened many doors for him leading into stage 3. The third stage of wealth creation is seeking opportunities that can easily be scaled once you've reached the point that the growth of your active earning potential starts to slow, and you have enough put away to feel comfortable taking on some new risks. Trench recommended having 6 figures in liquid net worth, but again, your results may vary. You shift your attention to seeking out opportunities that are more scalable. In Trench's case, this took the form of writing his book. It took a lot of time and effort to do, however, once it was done, it could be sold for years to come, with little additional time committed. The BiggerPockets website itself was another example of this. Sure, they were still writing new articles to bring in readers, but their old articles were still up and earning revenue without requiring any ongoing effort to maintain. That's what this stage is all about. Finding those opportunities and scaling them up for maximum payoff. So those are the 3 stages of wealth creation as laid out by Scott Trench. You find ways to become more frugal and financially efficient, which allows you to start saving a stockpile of cash. Once you've built up a long enough financial runway to transition to stage 2, you begin to focus on finding ways to maximize your income. And finally, once you've reached the point that the growth of your active income earning potential is starting to level off, you begin looking for other, more passive opportunities to scale your income and maximize your wealth. And that all seems simple enough to understand, but having a plan to follow is one thing. Actually being able to follow it is another. After all, there's a lot that goes into making this plan, or any well-thought-out long-term plan, work as well as it can. So let's talk about some unspoken, but no less important, traits and habits to make the most out of your wealth-building journey. While there is quite a bit of overlap in terms of traits that are helpful at each stage, I feel that when it comes to getting the most out of your frugality in stage 1, some of the most prominent and important bits are, first, honesty, self-awareness, and self-control. If you're going to be as financially efficient as possible, then you'll need to be able to keep your financial waste to a minimum. Granted, we're all going to run into stumbling blocks at some point. If we fall ill and have to stay in the hospital for a while, that's gonna cost quite a bit of money, but there's not always a whole heck of a lot we can do about it outside of doing our best to ensure that we're working from a strong financial foundation, so that hopefully any emergency that does come up, however inconvenient, will at least be financially survivable. That being said, there are a lot of potential areas where we might be wasting money that is manageable or outright avoidable. That's where knowing and being honest with yourself comes in. You need to be able to determine whether or not something is actually going to bring you enough enjoyment and value to be worth the money that you're spending on it. Whether that thing be a small morning latte, movie tickets, a concert, or as big as a Hawaiian cruise. And once you've made that determination, you need to have enough self-control to not overspend on those items. A second trait that can be helpful in maximizing your frugality is finding ways to be content with things in life that cost little or nothing. For instance, taking walks in the park costs very little, but can be a great way to fill up an hour or two of your day, while getting in a healthy amount of exercise to boot. And you might think that this sort of thing is only accessible to those who enjoy the simpler things in life. But I'd argue that that's only partly true. While all of us do certainly have preferences for some things over others, I'd argue that being able to notice and appreciate the small things in life is a learnable skill, much like learning to see the best in other people is. A third helpful trait is persistence and creativity. There are going to be some things that you deem to be worth the money, but are nevertheless expensive. Being willing to take the time and effort to seek out alternative ways to get the enjoyment you're looking for out of those things and out of those activities in a more affordable manner can help to ensure that you're only spending the amount of money you need to get what you actually want. A fourth helpful trait is having an open mind, as well as the right perspective. Reframing things, or even just being willing to try things, can be a very positive technique when it comes to making the most out of your money. Scott Trench actually had a great example of this when it came to his housing situation. Instead of thinking of a home as an investment, even if it did have the potential to appreciate in value, he saw it more as a budget stabilization tool. Through the use of house hacking, and just the fact that mortgage payments don't typically rise over time like rents do, he was better able to control his net spending over the years. When it comes to maximizing your income, it helps to have a strong work ethic, be a lifelong learner who's always willing to improve their skills, and be willing to work and help with others. But I'd also argue that patience and a positive attitude are important. Patience, because as much as we'd all wish it weren't true, there are times when our hard work and initiative may not be noticed right away, or pay off in the way that we'd hoped. In fact, sometimes it can even seem that our efforts are being actively disapproved of by others. But it's important to have patience during these moments because eventually, if we keep our eyes peeled, we'll find an opportunity where our efforts will be appreciated and rewarded. And a positive attitude because this approach is likely to lead to us working with a lot of different people, and possibly companies. And it's just generally more enjoyable to work with someone who has a positive attitude than someone who's normally very surly or cynical. So if we want to be able to take full advantage of any opportunities that we come across, it's going to be much easier to do so if we're bringing a positive attitude to the table. Finally, in terms of making the most out of these scalable opportunities, it helps to have a proclivity for taking action, as well as a strong network, and to be cognizant of the company that you keep. There's a lot of truth to the saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, after all. So whether the social network that you're building is in person or digital, be aware of how they may be affecting you over time. If the people around you are constantly making you feel down, or are always doubting and poking holes in your ideas, assuming that these holes are not based on reasonable concerns, you may want to look for other people to spend time with, because it's hard enough to succeed as it is, let alone when there's others actively dragging you down. And finally, it helps to have a low ego, or at least a willingness to listen to the ideas and opinions of others and admit when you're wrong and change course when necessary. Because no matter how smart or experienced we may be, there's always the possibility that we've missed something in our analysis. So it's important, especially when you're about to make a big decision like starting a new business venture, to consult with some other people and get their perspectives to ensure that you don't make any big and avoidable mistakes. Naturally, these aren't the only traits that can be helpful in maximizing your chances of financial success, but they are a few that came to mind as I was writing this script. What are some other traits that you feel have helped you on your financial journey? And what traits do you feel you still want to work on? Let me know in the comments section below. But that'll do it for me today. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already, subscribe, and hit that bell next to my name so you'll be notified of all my future uploads. I generally upload every single Monday, and if you have a friend that would be interested in this kind of content, be sure to share it with them. Let's really get this information out there and start our own financial revolution.